George Floyd, his anniversary of his death is today, May 25th, 2021. If you recall, 1 year ago, the entire country sort of paused as soon as we saw that image, that video footage of Derek Chauvin with his knee on the back of George Floyd's neck. And so we spent a lot of time on this channel dissecting everything that happened, multiple angles, body cameras. We covered the trial every single day that it went on, and we analyzed the outcome of the verdict, and we're still analyzing it. We're still trying to determine what really is going to happen, because there were some, I would say, improprieties or problems that happened during the trial that, of course, Derek Chauvin is going to be contesting in his appeal when he takes his appeal and finalizes his motion that are all post-conviction motions that we already know are coming because his defense attorney, Eric Nelson, has told us so. So a lot has been happening here, and now that a year has passed, everybody has had some time to reflect. Have we as a country evolved? Have we grown? Has anything changed? Have we emerged stronger as a result of this? And in fact, this is the very question that was being asked on a poster that was being spread around today for the remembrance ceremony of George Floyd's memorial. So apparently there's a foundation called the George Floyd Memorial Foundation, and they have a inaugural remembrance, which was scheduled for May 23rd, which was over the weekend, to today, May 25th. And they're noting that they're going to have a downtown Minneapolis rally, 4 p.m., a peaceful rally, peaceful. And it's going to be on Sunday, May 23rd. So they asked the question, the same question that I'm asking here. 1 year, what's changed? What's changed? Because when we all saw the video that day of Derek Chauvin and George Floyd, I think the entire country was sort of disgusted by what we saw. And for a brief moment, for that glimmering second, we all maybe had some momentum to actually talk about justice reform in this country. Very excited about it. As somebody who's a criminal defense lawyer, I was thinking, wow, this is finally the moment where we're going to be able to talk about some important issues about accountability and transparency, and maybe finally a lot of these issues will come to the forefront. Well, lo and behold, we fast forward a couple months, even a couple weeks, and we turn on the news, and now we have a lot of protesters and social unrest and BLM and Antifa, and they're torching Wendy's and used tire shops and car dealerships and generally causing mayhem. And so what happened immediately after that? Well, there was more division, and this became a left versus right thing. Then BLM started sort of aligning themselves with the Democrats, and then the police started aligning themselves with the Republicans, and then that's kind of all she wrote. And now it turns into this racial division problem, and now BLM demands, as we're going to see in the show today, they're demanding that Donald Trump be convicted of a crime, and you're going, what the hell did that have to do with George Floyd or police brutality? What did Donald Trump, who passed a First Step Act, have to do with any of this stuff? And so it's turned into this political food fight, and it's just been really disappointing for somebody who wants to see actual criminal justice reform. So as we go through this, we're going to hear some reactions of our elected leaders, the people who we want to fix these problems, that we sort of entrust with solving these issues. We're going to see if they've done anything. And as we go through this segment, of course, we want to pay tribute to George Floyd, right? He was killed. The law says that he was murdered, according to the jury. Still have some questions about the presumption of innocence and the beyond a reasonable doubt and some of the impartialities and all, but those are separate and apart from the main question here. Is that we want to honor life. We want to respect the dead and remember the pain and sort of the impact that he has had on this country, one way or the other, right? The entire nation stopped to deal with this, and specifically to pay attention with the Chauvin trial. So we want to, go through this with some empathy and some respect and some reverence for George Floyd, his family, and all of the people in this country that have been touched by this loss. We also want to make sure that we're staying in touch with reality. We also, are going to call it straight here on this show and on this channel. And got to remember that George Floyd was not a saint. He wasn't Mother Teresa out there. And he's sort of being elevated to this position where there's sort of this hagiography happening where everybody is saying that this is a sort of a symbol of the best that we have to offer of America regarding racial justice, and sort of emanating from the African American community. And I'm thinking, there are so many other incredible things that we can talk about that we don't have to make this equivalence between everything. Okay, George Floyd, it was a tragic death, and we're sorry that he's not here, but he also wasn't a saint. Okay, and both things can be true, and we can discuss this case with empathy without having to go one way or the other. Okay, if you are sort of on the right side of the aisle on this topic, many people, they wake up and they go, George Floyd was just a drug addict and he was a dreg of society and he's not worthy of any consideration or any empathy at all. And anybody who throws their hands up at the police. If they get killed, so what? I don't even care about that, right? That's sort of far on that one side. And on the other side, we have this idea that George Floyd is a saint and that he's walking around like the second coming or something. And you're going, that's not right either. So if we want to be true and accurate, if we want to be at least reasonable and rational, I think we got to find something in the middle. We're going to try to do that today as we go through some of these reactions. So first and foremost, from USA Today, we have, they're saying that they went around and they talked about what Floyd's death meant to them. They asked leaders from around the nation. They said that they use words like trauma, turmoil, fear, and sadness, but hope that things might be different this time, that justice might prevail. So, when I hear this type of I don't know what this means, that justice might prevail, because Derek Chauvin was convicted. That the fight for change would lead to tangible results. For some, those results include the passage of the George Floyd Act, right, which bans chokehold and no-knock warrants and limits qualified immunity, so police officers aren't shielded from certain lawsuits. The legislation, which passed the House of Representatives in March, would also prohibit racial and religious profiling, create a national police misconduct registry that would compile complaints. All these leaders say something has to change. The mayor of Atlanta worried about her 4 black children. A human rights leader described feeling yanked out of his body. America's poet laureate said she had witnessed a public lynching. All right, so some strong language. Okay. All right, let's continue on before I get all riled up. I can't get riled up too soon. I got to pace myself. The show just started. Relax. All right, we'll get there. We have America breathed a sigh of relief coming from Julian Castro, former mayor of San Antonio, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under Obama, and he ran for president. 1 year later, it's clear that George Floyd's murder will serve as a marker in history by which we measure our progress towards racial equality. Floyd's death helped spark the largest protest movement in our nation's history, one that inspired tens of millions of Americans to say unequivocally that Black lives matter. It's a movement led by organizers and activists carried the weight of the lives lost before Floyd, like Brown, Garner, Bland, Breonna Taylor, and a couple others. America breathed a sigh of relief as Floyd's killer, Chauvin, was convicted for murder. Yet, it was but a small measure of justice against the backdrop of nearly 1,000 lives lost to police violence in the time since his death. So you just have to, 1,000 lives lost to police violence. And I've seen this meme sort of spreading around here. And I actually got into it with somebody on Twitter about this. Somebody said, well, police violence is responsible for killing, 1,000 people. And I said, police violence? What are you talking about? You mean like did they, murder them? Violence, the way that I understand the definition, and you can look this up, there's sort of an implication that it's done without legitimacy, like it's not justified. If it's violent, that means you're sort of acting outside of proper behavior. There's sort of an unacceptableness to it. It's not normal versus justified action. Okay, self-defense is typically not violence. Technically, you are doing something that might look like violence, but you say this was violent when it was not legitimate, when it was unjustified, is sort of how I use the term. Now, technically, if you look at the definition, you can make arguments about that. So it's sort of one of those words that's right down in the middle. And, the way that I've always used it, it's when it's illegitimate. If it's legitimate, you don't call it violent. You call it, no, I punched that guy in the face. Why? Because he swung at me first. I wasn't being violent. He was being violent. I ended the violent confrontation. But I was justified by hitting him back or shooting back. It's a small sliver of nuance there, but here what they're talking about is police violence resulting in 1,000 dead or nearly 1,000 lives. So is he saying that every single one of those was like the equivalent of what happened between Chauvin and Floyd? Was every single one of those 1,000 deaths totally unjustified? Were those all a result of police violence? I mean, do we have police killing multiple people every day violently? Or are some of those justified? Are some of those actually necessary and maybe shouldn't be categorized in that same bucket of police violent deaths? So it's manipulating its persuasion to make his point, and I just think it's disingenuous. Chauvin's conviction reminded us that that despite some progress towards racial justice in the last year, we haven't made nearly enough. It was a reminder that the movement sparked by George Floyd's death is more than about just one man. It's about tearing down, here it is, the systemic racism that prevents us from achieving full equality. In fact, true justice for Floyd and other victims of police won't be realized until we reimagine public safety to protect all people equally. May we have the courage to do so. We've got over here Bernice King. She's the youngest child of Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King. She's part of the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. She says, "We've got some difficult days ahead. My father, Martin Luther King Jr., made this statement on the eve before he was assassinated 53 years ago. He knew that if we did not heed his prophetic warning telling us that the clock of destiny is ticking out, now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice, we would face difficult days." Says, "We encountered extremely difficult days when technology captured 9 minutes and 29 seconds. I cried and breathed a sigh of relief when Chauvin was found guilty. I know the trauma and the turmoil in the hearts and minds of many persist. It's my hope that we can elevate our strategy for true peace and conversation around who we should be as an interconnected humanity." All right, so in this critical hour, we must, by multitudes, rise to be love, implement demands of nothing, saying nothing here. This will prevent an alternative outcome, make justice a priority. Social tensions will grow. Says absolutely nothing. But, you know, she's not a politician. She's the daughter, so you don't expect anything meaningful when you're sort of giving these generic statements, right? It's just generic statements. So here's another one from Cory Booker. We have here, he says, George Floyd was a loving father, devoted brother, someone whose smile lit up a room. George Floyd's life matters. Since I was born to be black in America, learn how to protect ourselves. In the wake of Floyd's death, we have seen a nation awaken to the reality black Americans live every day. We've seen people across the country and across the world demonstrate that changing the reality we live in is not an impossible task. It's our collective calling. Great Americans have demonstrated not just the right words, not just our voices, but action. All right, well, you're a U.S. Senator from New Jersey. So the House of Representatives has already passed the George Floyd bill. So you and your 51 other, or 49 other, plus Kamala Harris, you make 51. So maybe you can get some momentum on that and pass some bills. Now, Joe Biden, President Biden, met with the Floyd family today amid uncertain progress on race, written by Cleve Woodson Jr. over at the Washington Post. On Tuesday, a year, family members of the Floyd family went to go visit Biden. Psaki, press secretary at the White House, said Biden is, quote, eager to listen to their perspectives and to hear what they have to say. An unfulfilled promise looms over the meeting as progress on police reform has stagnated, including legislation bearing Floyd's name that Biden hoped would be law on the anniversary of his death, but that didn't happen. Bernice Lorden, an organizer with Tampa Dream Defenders, a group that aimed at ending police prisons, said, while I do believe that flying Floyd's family up and stuff like that, it's a nice gesture, but it's not the change that we need. She's right. She's right. It's all just a bunch of show. She says, we need deep, deep shifts in how we view public safety in these cities. Martin was a black 17-year-old from Florida who was shot and killed in 2012 by a local resident. Former President Trump regularly made racially charged statements and was hostile to BLM, deriding them as violent thugs. Biden, in many ways, framed his presidential run in opposition to that, making racial equity central to his campaign. That raised hopes among civil rights leaders that he would enact far-reaching and long overdue changes. But I've been screaming about this. This guy has a record of 30 years of putting people in prison and siding with law enforcement and big bureaucracies that are set up to facilitate the entire operation of that organization. For 30 years, okay? And Kamala Harris, she's been doing it for less than that, but also substantially when she was a prosecutor and then the attorney general for California. So anybody who bought into this fake hoax that they were going to suddenly do something about justice reform, well, I'm sorry that you fell for it, but we knew that was coming. Here is a clip from, what is this? From GMA, ABC News. This looks like that guy. Here he is.
George, right here at the White House, Floyd's family, including his 7-year-old daughter, Gianna, are going to be here. At this point, the White House, you said it was private, isn't going to allow cameras inside for this meeting. Now, you'll remember this. The president, after that Chauvin verdict, spoke directly with the Floyd family. He told them he would get police reform passed. He said that this would be the first opportunity to deal with genuine systemic racism. But, George, the president then set that deadline for that to happen today. Right now, though, Congress is at a stalemate on this issue.
Yeah, there seems to be the bipartisan negotiations seem to be stalled over this whole issue of immunity for police officers.
Yeah, exactly. But the key is here, there are bipartisan talks happening. Both sides just yesterday said that they are making progress. The House did pass some sort of police reform that would include banning chokeholds, ending no-knock warrants. But the issue is in this 50-50 split Senate where Democrats need Republicans to get on board in order to pass this. There's real disagreement right now over this issue of qualified immunity. This is basically the ability to hold officers legally accountable for misconduct. I asked the White House yesterday, are they going to move forward on police reform? The press secretary told me that they believe they will be able to make progress, but right now, George, this deadline is set to come and go.
Okay, Cecilia, thanks very much. We're going to have a lot more on George Floyd, the impact his murder has had on our country.
Stephanopoulos, that's that guy's name. So they obviously, we're trying, we're trying. It's those damn Republicans again. They're not letting us get anything through. It's qualified immunity, They love those police officers. Biden, when the Floyd family was there, knelt in sympathy with protesters during his first in-person campaign event during the pandemic, made history by selecting Kamala Harris. During his first joint session, he urged lawmakers to pass police reform by May 25. Obviously, today is May 25th. They didn't do that. Chauvin was found guilty of murder. He says, we're going to do a lot more to get more done. We're going to stay at it until we get it done. This is going to be the first shot at dealing with genuine systemic racism. So, all right, let's see if they can get it done. But the black community, like many other Americans, is divided on whether Biden and other national leaders have fulfilled their promise. Few dispute that Biden has elevated black Americans and other people to more prominent positions than any of his predecessors, though some note his inner circle is still largely white. Racist. He speaks regularly about structural racism, and he designed his coronavirus relief package to address racial inequities, which is actually now getting challenged. I think he just lost that, actually, in a court of a federal district court. Separate video. But a criminal justice reform bill that he passed in the House has stalled. Skeptical activists worry the energy that motivated millions to protest won't be enough to overcome the inertia of Washington. And it sort of feels like that, doesn't it? Kind of feels like the criminal justice energy has just sort of been deflated ever since Chauvin was convicted. If Chauvin would have been like maybe a split verdict, or if he would have been acquitted on all charges, well, then certainly that energy, that momentum would have been steamrolling ahead. But since they got everything that they wanted, including $27 million for the Floyd family, we've got a number of other officers that have been charged as a result of their crimes. And so sounds like things are kind of moving their direction. So maybe some of the energy is deflating out. And if that can continue to dissipate, which is all part of the strategy, then they don't have to do anything. They don't have to pass anything. Nothing changes at all. George Floyd's anniversary comes and goes. Everybody, just bring him in here, bring the family in, do a press conference, show everybody around. Oh, look, hey, this is great. That's it. Nothing gets done. Why? Because they're all politicians. They don't do anything. They just talk a lot and they release statements. And like Cory Booker and Julian Castro, they say nothing. They're all in the government. They've been in the government for as long as I've been alive, Joe Biden and many of these people, and nothing gets done. In fact, they do the opposite. So we'll see if anything happens here. Some have been concerned for months that Biden, a moderate who was criticized during the campaign for speaking kindly of segregationist senators, who told the host of a radio show aimed at a black audience that if they selected Trump over him, then you ain't black, was ill-equipped to tackle the problems. Yeah, no kidding. But Donald Trump was the racist. Since Biden's election, rising crime in U.S. cities has made many politicians even more wary of proposals to defund the police because it's a stupid idea, a key aim of many protest movements. Since Lorendan led demonstrators in protests through the streets, the latter has voted to increase police funding by $13. Folks, the reason I get so irritated about this is because these debates and these fake attempts at trying to solve anything are just wrecking the entire movement. I mean, when every time we hit a little bit of a roadblock here, nothing gets done. And so we had all of this momentum to go one direction, and now we're just seeing people drop the ball left and right, and it's just so irritating. The reality is what we're doing right now isn't working. We need to try something different, and that's a long and hard conversation. I think people get scared when they hear defund the police because they feel like we're going to go back to some kind of wild West-like kind of life, right? Yeah, exactly right. Defund the police movement is counterproductive. It doesn't accomplish any goals at all, and for some reason, they're still using it. A senior Biden advisor has engaged minority communities on behalf of the White House. Biden's coronavirus relief package, for example, included billions for disadvantaged farmers, about a quarter of whom are black. Says, I'm just coming from an event with black farmers where we're educating them on how to get the loans paid off. $5 billion in terms of down payment on equity in that space. Pretty sure that a federal court threw that out, though. He also cited statistics in the American Rescue Plan. They reduce black poverty and on and on. He also said that Biden and others in the administration continue to work with a bipartisan group to find common ground on police reform. Says there's no magic wand, says a former senator from Louisiana. It's hard work. Yeah, okay. It's complicated. It's time consuming. Senator Booker said the talks have been meaningful, that he and Tim have gotten an honest negotiation going, and that we're trying to get a good place. We support that. We don't want a rush bill. We want a meaningful bill. Okay, so Cory Booker, Tim Scott, others, they said they're still working towards a deal. Still working through our key differences on key issues, they said. Laura Endin says she and other demonstrators never expected the government to take the lead, saying this has to come from ordinary people. She says, I'm encouraged because I see people have continued to stay in the streets, like people who have continued to be public, and more and more and more. We just need our government to catch up to where the people are. So, she's frustrated from a different perspective. I'm frustrated from a different perspective. Everybody's just kind of tired of it. Meanwhile, all of our politicians are just out there just talking. Oh, we're negotiating still. About what? Qualified immunity? Oh, that's holding up the entire bill, everything? Okay. You sure? You can't work that out? The entire package is held up because of qualified immunity? Can you leave that part out and pass something else or show us what a framework for a bill would be? Here's Ben Crump out there in front of the press, as always.
The president and the vice president met with the family for over an hour. And they're going to tell you some things that happened in that meeting. I know the president was very personal because he got to know this family over the years, and he wanted to check on them on today of all days to see how they were doing, to reiterate that they are still doing everything to make sure that his legacy is respected, and that involves us going to meet with senators in just a few moments to continue to press forward for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that he says he is ready to sign any day. He said that he doesn't want to sign a bill that doesn't have substance and meaning, so he is going to be patient to make sure it's the right bill, not a rush bill. Also, the family encouraged the president to continue to meet with the civil rights leaders and advocacy groups who have been working on this for decades, like Reverend Allen, the NAACP, and the National Urban League, and many others.
All right, so, when you hear phrases like that, we want the right bill, not a rushed bill. You go, oh, that's just political BS speak, meaning that there's not going to be any bill because they don't agree on what to do. And I think both parties are in alignment on this. I don't blame the Democrats. I don't blame the Republicans. I think that they're both really, really truthfully kind of anti-justice reform. I know that the Democrats play along with this, but they don't. They know that defund the police is not a reasonable solution. And so they throw that out there to placate the far left who want to do that, knowing that really the base of the Democratic Party wants nothing to do with that. So they just kind of, float that out there, but knowing that the bread and butter of the party have no interest in defunding the police at all. And so they're not going to make a move that's going to alienate the base of their party. That would be insane. Here is the statement from Joe Biden on the first anniversary. He says, today in the Oval Office, I met with Floyd family. It's been a year since all of that, 9 minutes, 29 seconds. Yet the Floyd family, extraordinary courage. Daughter told me, Daddy changed the world. He has. His murder launched a summer of protests, civil rights eras. Last month's conviction of the police officer who murdered Floyd. Wow, didn't even use his name. Wow. Didn't even use Chauvin's name in that. So look at that. No Chauvin. To deliver real change, we must have accountability when law enforcement officers violate their oaths. Okay, so accountability, we see. We need to build lasting trust between the majority of the men and women who wear the badge honorably in the communities they serve. We must have accountability and trust in our justice system. The negotiations on the George Floyd Act are ongoing. I have strongly supported the legislation. I appreciate the good faith efforts. It's my hope they'll get a bill to my desk. We have to act. We have an inflection point. Battle for the soul of America. Oh my gosh. Tired of that phrase. This administration beats the hell out of that one. So now we know that they're going to, keep moving forward with this attempt at a bill. We'll see if anything happens. Formally, the U.S. State Department is now supporting the BLM ideology and formal cables that they're sending to different countries, nation states around the world. This article is over from Human Events, and take a look at who's over here. If you're familiar with Twitter, you probably know who Jack Posobiec is, and he went over to Human Events very recently. He announced this on Twitter, and he got an exclusive. Says that a leaked State Department memo indicates official support for the BLM agenda. And so you may be wondering what the BLM agenda is. I'm going to show you that here in a little bit in the next segment. But it is curious now that it sounds like our government is telling other governments this is the official position of the United States. A source within the Biden State Department, wishing to remain anonymous, so keep that in context, indicates that all U.S. diplomatic and consular posts are being encouraged to display shows of support for BLM on Tuesday, May 25th, the one-year anniversary of the death. The memo reads in part, I'm going to show you this, which is why, it looks official to me. The department supports the use of the term, they wrote this in there. The department supports the use of the term Black Lives Matter in messaging, content, speeches, and other diplomatic engagements with foreign audiences to advance racial equity and access to justice on May 25th and beyond. Okay, so it's not just ending today. Isn't what just a one-year anniversary in memoriam type of an event. This is in the future. Just feel free to run with that. We encourage posts to focus on the need to eliminate systemic racism and its continued impact. And do you remember what one consequence of this type of language was? Remember, we played it here on this show. Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State for the United States, had that delegation where he was meeting with the Chinese, and the Chinese came over, and so the Chinese consulate's on the other side, Anthony Blinken's on one side of the table, and Anthony Blinken reads his statement, and he's reading down. He says, the U.S. is really concerned about what you're doing with the Uyghurs up there in China and all these problems. And the Chinese consulate says, what did you just say to me? You're calling me a racist? You're calling what we're doing genocide? How about this? You just had your entire country wrecked for the entire summer because of your racism, United States, because you people don't know how to handle your own internal affairs. How about you get your house in order and deal with your racial ethnic problems before you come and throw stones at the Chinese in our house? And Anthony Blinken's like, what just happened? Okay, didn't go well, and it was a big slap in the face to the American State Department. And of course, the media didn't really emphasize that a lot, but a lot of people watched that and thought, oh God, this guy's way in over his head, because we're playing two different games. They're playing the communist world domination game. We're playing woke America, don't hurt your fifis because we don't want to offend anybody game, and it doesn't work well on the international stage. The memo now, which is coming out of Blinken's State Department, says, which is in part a woke statement on social justice. Now, this is back to Posobiec's commentary, and it's a part apology for U.S. actions. Despite the documented actions of BLM protesters during the 2020 riots, despite New York Times reporting, our federal government nonetheless decided to endorse and promote with admitted Marxist root BLM people, which I think is actually a fair characterization of that. You can go and look at their own website and connect it to some sort of Marxist teachings. Now, this is a copy of the unclassified State Department memo that Posobiec posted. You can see this was dated May 22nd. This is the subject header here says, commemorating George Floyd diplomatic engagement and use of Black Lives Matter language and material. Official statement referenced an executive order that Biden passed previously. This looks like they're tagging it to where it's going. We've got, all diplomatic and consular posts collective immediately from the Secretary of State out of Washington, D.C. Here's what it says, unclassified. This is an action request. Please see paragraphs 13. Summary, May 25th marks the 1 year since the brutal murder of George Floyd. And again, 9 minutes, 29 seconds. That goes in. Anytime you're talking about George Floyd, you have to make sure there's a sentence in there of 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Otherwise, it's not a real article. 1 year later, many in the international community will honor Floyd and acknowledge the long journey that nations face. May 25th, 1 year commemoration, police brutality. January 20th is one of his first official actions. Biden signed Executive Order 13985. Doing all of this stuff. So this effort is a top priority, wants to achieve his policy objectives here by condemning and combating racism. We have the intolerance against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. We've got the White House Gender Policy Council. We have the memorandum on LGBTQI plus people around the world. We have racial equity and support for underserved communities. So now we have under paragraph 1, the department policy with respect to advancing racial equity as part of our supporting our nation's interests are as follows. They go through the whole list here, right? Partnering with like-minded nations, promoting democratic principles, combating violence and discrimination against members of racial, ethnic, or other underserved communities, building coalitions, expanding, and so on and so on. The documents below provide the talking points and press guidance on racial inequity and discrimination. They go down, they give us a list of everything that's in here, remarks by the ambassador, and on and on and on. According to U.S. Special Counsel, social movement, BLM, gained prominence, outlined by 2020 guidance. So here what they're saying is you can actually participate this. And so what they're doing is they're giving us some sort of official kind of legal guidance as to why this is authorized. They're saying, listen, we already talked about this in 2020. There was the Office of the Special Counsel. They wrote this. They said, hey, the Hatch Act generally allows employees to engage in BLM-related activity while on duty or in the workplace. But as described below, they're still prohibited from combining BLM activity with, quote, political activity while on duty or in the workplace, and from engaging in partisan political fundraising. So they're saying you can engage in BLM-related activity, but not combining it with political activity, which to me sounds like it's the same damn thing. What's the difference between the two? Isn't BLM-related activity also political activity? Political activity, they define as an activity directed toward the success or failure of a political party. Oh, so it's not that. Oh, but how about this? A partisan political group. So is BLM a partisan political group? Well, if you look at their website, one of their demands is that Donald Trump never run for office again and he be convicted. That sounds pretty partisan because he is the leader of a political party in the United States. This carries on guidance on BLM displays. So any BLM displays within the interior of the mission, well, they're allowed. They're at the chief of the mission's discretion. As outlined below, they may decide to hang BLM flags. Wonder if they would allow like Tea Party flags. I wonder if they would allow that, or like a MAGA flag. Would they allow a MAGA flag? Or how about a Don't Tread on Me flag? I wonder if that would be allowed there. Any external facing flagpole to any chief, so that they get to decide that. We have U.S. code that defines what to do with the flags. Action requests, posts are strongly encouraged to make, so they're talking about posts, okay, so like social media posts. Posts are strongly encouraged to make full use of department tools and resources to promote policy objectives and to advance racial equity and support for underserved communities. So you can take that to mean what you want it to mean. Posts may use the full content of their evergreen content. The department stands ready to assist posts. So I guess maybe this is post. Oh, so that's not social media posts. This will be posts like people at the different like deployments. So the people who are at these different teams, posts are strongly encouraged to make use of all the tools and the resources. So not just in social media. Now I think there was something in here I got confused about social media. But you get the point, okay? It's an official state cable. Says feel free. Go ahead and use all this stuff. Talk about it however you want. Let's take a look at some questions over here from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We have Boxy Punk Chick is in the house. Says, when I hear from BLM talk about how they're all for blacks, why do their followers have so many issues with people like Candace Owen? She is black. Kind of seems like total hypocrisy. Well, it's sort of, you have to be black plus the same ideology. It's not just skin color. You have to be, I think that's how that works, because there are a lot of very, I think they're black. I think they identify that way. Like, I don't know, Justice Thomas, for example, right? Why don't they like him all that much? Because he doesn't subscribe to their ideology. So it's more about ideology than it is about race. If you don't subscribe to look at Caitlyn Jenner. She got thrown out pretty quickly because she didn't subscribe to the ideology. Sharon Quidney says BLM and their supporters, for example, Antifa, will never be satisfied until they see their boots on the necks of all white people. They have zero interest in justice reform. They are total racist, CRT racism. They are making a martyr of George Floyd. I'm waiting for the song. Yeah, it feels like there will never be a point in which anybody says, finally, we solved this. Got it. This is working. Justice system is working. We nailed it. Nice job, America. Never going to happen. LT13 says, when is anyone going to talk about personal responsibility? No one even cares to mention trying to live an honest, non-criminal life. I have seen firsthand the effects of absent parents. Most of my students live with their grandparents. That makes a deep wound in their hearts, and the cycle of hurt people continues. Oh, it's beautiful. Hurt people, right? It's bravo. It's like you can't punish the pain out of people. If they're hurt, they're going to hurt others. Yeah, it's a good question. I think that absolutely has to be part of the conversation. It sounds like right now we're only talking about the police, but I think that that's not fair. They're one part of the problem because they also have to work with a society, sort of the yin and the yang. We've got two components. I think if we want a solution that represents both people, we need both parties to the table, and we need to hear from both perspectives. We have Dr. Renal MD in the house, says Biden needs to get his time machine and meet with his former, less hair-plugged self, Avenger style. Specifically, as chairman of the Senate Judiciary, he crafted the legislation these people are complaining about. I know, it's so funny. It really is like amazing. So, all of these Democratic senators, Democrats in general, anybody in this country who's upset with the state of our criminal justice system, they don't realize that Joe Biden built the entire thing. And I'm not kidding. He passed a bill in 1984, passed another one in 1986, passed another one in 1988, passed another one in 1994, all of them having to do with criminal justice reform. And at one point, he said that any single bill that had anything to do with criminal justice reform that came out of Congress since 1976 had his stinking name on it. He said that. Go look that quote up. So he built the entire system, everything. Mandatory sentencing, 3 strikes rules, all of this stuff. Joe Biden. And guess who was his co-pilot in this whole thing? Kamala Harris, because as Joe Biden was passing the rules, she was enforcing the rules as prosecutor and attorney general from California. So now all of these people are sitting in the White House going, oh yeah, we hear your plight. This is just so horrendous. We're going to really institute some meaningful change now. And they're going, yeah, I know. We just met with them in the Ben Crump's out there. We just met with Biden and Kamala up there. They're really focused on this. They're not going to rush a bill. They're going to get the right bill. So just hang tight. Yeah, going back with his third of $27 million. He's doing okay, whether there's a bill or not. Sharon Quidney says, I'm so sick of the lie that Trump made racially charged remarks. During his presidency, black unemployment was at historic lows. Why can't anybody remember that the Democrats were the party of slavery and Lincoln was a Republican? Yes. I love that. We have High Desert says, Rob, what is your take on all civilian police review boards? So, I haven't seen enough of them, to be honest. I would like to see some data on this. I would like to see what the makeup is. Your question is sort of general. And so, there are some ideas that I've seen float around where you have, maybe it's a civilian police review board so that it's not, officers on the board or law enforcement officials, but you have 2 prosecutors, you have 2 defense attorneys, and you have a judge. And these people volunteer for a council like this. And so you sort of take it out of the hands of law enforcement, but law enforcement is highly represented by the prosecution. They're also, this board is also represented by the defense. And you've also got, somebody who's, a neutral judge person. And so, that sort of is taking it out of the police and giving it to lawyers, essentially. So I'm not sure that that's any better, but I tell you this, I've seen a lot of civilian councils and civilian boards. I'm not sure that I would find that, better. I think that it might go the other way. Like every single cop who shows up in front of them might be skewered and eliminated and, given the death penalty. So I would like to see how it works out in practice. I'm interested in the idea and some alternative solutions. I do like the idea that it's somebody else investigating the police, not themselves, because every time they investigate themselves, it's the damnedest thing, but they find they did nothing wrong. They say, oh, no, nothing happened here. You're good. Get back out there, Joe. Go out there and enforce some justice. We have Joe Snow says cops should go back to red sedans and revolvers. No Humvees, Bearcats, federal grants for training, pre-drug war, normal human being police officers who aren't trained to believe everyone is a criminal until they're either satisfied or they're not. And they have your neck securely under their knee. That's from Joe Snow. It's sort of a return to form, go back to civilian policing rather than militaristic policing where everything is like you just, have to kick a door down in Fallujah, because we're not in Fallujah. We're in America. And in fact, I'm in Scottsdale right now. So why are they treating us like we're in Fallujah? Not currently, but you know what I'm saying. From time to time, I've represented clients that felt like they were in Fallujah for nothing that warranted being treated like they were in Fallujah. We have It's Ed says, I was born into poverty. Me too, Ed. I grew up in the same environment as my brother. I worked hard, never called off, took out student loans to go to school and get my degrees. Now I'm in the top 10%. While my brother did the opposite, and he's still, quote, in poverty. Equity states I should distribute my wealth to my brother for social justice. It's just doesn't seem right. How can anyone that has pulled themselves up by their bootstraps accept the idea of equity? I don't know, Ed. I think it's a great point. I really don't understand it, and I actually don't understand it from the other perspective. I mean, my story is much the same. Grew up extremely poor until my mom sort of, kind of got her feet under her when I was about in high school. So that entirety, my entire youth was sort of rough. And, I made do. Got a scholarship, put myself through college, put myself through law school. Here we are. Now, I agree that there's something very powerful about sort of earning something for yourself, going out there saying, I got a vision, man. I'm tired of my circumstances. I'm tired of living in squalor with no money, wondering if my bill's my electricity is going to be on when I come home from law school. And that was like literally the circumstances that I was in. I was working for free for 2 years. I had no money. So I was catering on the side. Long story. The point being, there's value in that. There's value in going through that struggle. I'm extremely grateful for everything that I have. And I wake up every day with some vigor and some energy because I accomplished that. And damn it, I'm not going to let that backslide. I'm proud of everything that I made. I'm proud of what I'm doing in this world. I've got a big mission. I've got a big vision, and I want to go accomplish that. Now, would I have that if somebody just gave me everything? If somebody just said, oh, well, you know what, kid? You kind of grew up poor. You got a Down syndrome brother, single mom. You've got, disappeared father. The whole thing was kind of a mess. And now because of your plight, we're going to give you all of this. We're going to give you an education. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that. We're going to give you all this. And what happens to those? What happens to those people? I've seen those people. I know a lot of those people because they're my colleagues out in the legal community. And I'll tell you what, little bit of a different way that they conduct themselves in the world, a little bit of a different impact I think that they're going to leave on the world because they're sort of inwardly focused. They're focused on themselves and their own self-gratification and their own sort of puffing themselves up and making the world about them. When you have to go out there and earn it, you realize nobody's going to give you anything. You got to develop service. You got to give something to the world. You got to provide more value. And that is really the lesson in that. Not somebody who's out there, just give me everything. Give me something. I feel like I'm oppressed. Get out there, make something of yourself, and live with the rewards for the rest of your life. So when we talk about this concept of this rebalancing of equity, I understand that not everybody starts at the same starting line. I get that. And I want people to have all of the opportunity in the world. But that comes from removing obstacles, not from putting weights on the shoulders of people who are more successful in society. And it really breaks my heart that there are a lot of people who are being raised up in America today that don't understand this concept, and they're not being taught it, and nobody is preaching about it the way that they should be, because they are going to lose out on one of the most beautiful things about being an American and being alive in this day and age, and it just is a sad thing. Thank you, Ed, for that great comment. We have another one from It's Ed says, Thomas Sowell stated, based on statistical analysis, the greatest harm to the black community was the destruction of the nuclear family. BLM demands the destruction of the nuclear family according to their own manifesto, which oddly aligns with Marx's and Engels' ideologies. Doesn't seem like BLM really cares about the black community. Well, I actually agree with that. We have Dr. Renal MD said, did a lawyer prepare that guidance memo? They behave as if BLM is a concept, which it literally can be, but then it refers to it as an organization. Seems on point, a violation of the Hatch Act specifically, if BLM endorses candidates. Well, BLM on their own website, they say that they want sort of the removal of a certain political party on their website. We have the list here in the next segment. We have It's Ed says 607 black people were murdered in Chicago in the last 365 days. Where's BLM for that? Is IA part of the police union? If so, how is that not a conflict of interest? So, it is, but it kind of isn't. It's sort of under the same umbrella. I think it depends on what city you're talking about. But yeah, they're sort of considered to be within the same entity. That's why when we talk about civilian or sort of external party review boards, we're pulling it out of anything that has to do with law enforcement. It is a conflict of interest. That's the problem. That's why so many people are upset about it and why it needs to change. Great questions. Really appreciate all the love and the support over from watching thewatchers.locals.com.